So I love Christmas, and I know people say that all the time, and I believe it, but it's always followed by a list of things that they don't like about Christmas. They're like, I love Christmas, except for I don't like putting up my lights. I don't like the crowds. I don't like to, have to wait in line at H-E-B just to get 3 things when someone's feeding a party of 60, right? Like all those things, people always say, I love Christmas, and to be honest with you, I like most things about it. I even occasionally like a cheesy Hallmark Christmas movie with my wife. I like singing all the songs, even the ones I don't like so much. I really do like it. There's a couple I don't like. I love Elvis, but I don't like Blue Christmas. It always just makes me feel kind of sad. Like, man, this really is kind of sad. Thanks, Elvis. You just brought the mood down. Last Christmas, right? That song, Last Christmas, I Gave You My Heart. I don't like that song. I always feel like I hope that guy figured it out. I hope he was able to give his heart to someone. It worked out the next year. I'm not a huge fan of fruitcake. Anyone else? Wassail, not my jam, right? Figgy pudding, just those aren't my, but here's the thing, I will try it. Like if you were to invite me over to your home today and say, I got this great family recipe of figgy pudding, I'm like, hey, let's give it a shot, right? I'll kind of try anything, right? I don't mind being in a huge crowd of people. We were at Trail of Lights the other night, and I'm like, all right, this is great. I don't mind this, it's okay. But there's one thing that really does bug me about Christmas. I'm just going to tell it to you. I'm kind of going to be on a soapbox here because I do got the microphone. But when you tell someone Merry Christmas, when you tell them Merry Christmas, and then they like respond where they kind of look at you, and then they do that head tilt thing. You know what I'm talking about? When it's kind of like, oh, you're one of those people. They do the head tilt thing, and they kind of just do it's not a smile, it's like a kind of like an arrogant, kind of like just, and then they say this in the snootiest of voices, Happy Holidays. Here's the thing, Christmas is about Christ. I remember this moment, it was a decade ago this Christmas. We lived in this tiny house, you guys. I mean, it was, you could almost touch like the walls. You could almost reach across. It was so small. We lived in this little townhouse in Hillsboro, Oregon, and we had 2 little girls at the time. I remember this Christmas, I'm in the kitchen, and my daughters are playing, and we got them one of those sets, the nativity set, but it was this like squishy rubber. It was by Little Things, and so it's supposed to be like child-proof, like they're not big enough to hurt anyone with it, right? If they throw it at their sibling, they're gonna be okay, but they're not small enough to choke on it, right? So they're good, right? And I'm working on something, and I hear my oldest turn to my youngest. Naomi was 1 at the time, and she had just turned 1, and she's sitting in one of those, are they bimbo? The Bumbo, thank you, Bumbo chairs, like, not bimbo, not bimbo. Bumbo. And she's sitting in this chair, and these chairs are great because they can't move. They can't fall over. They got a good sturdy base. And she's sitting there, and she's got these cheeks that are just, they're cheeks for days, right? And my daughter, Zariah, she's 3 at the time, and she's got this cute little ponytail on, and she's dressed herself to the nines, and they're playing with this nativity scene. And she goes, Naomi, do you know what Christmas is all about? Naomi just looks at her with these big cheeks, like, tell me, right? I'm your audience. And she starts going off. She goes, Naomi, let me tell you something. She said, you're a baby, and people love babies. They love babies at Christmas, and you're a cute baby, so people are going to want to hold you a lot over the next couple of days. They're going to try to make you do that laugh thing that you do because you're a cute baby. But listen, Naomi, it's not about baby Naomi. It's not about you. Christmas is not about you. Don't think for a moment it's about you. It's about baby Jesus. And I'm sitting in the kitchen, I'm just laughing, but I'm also so proud because she got it, right? My 3-year-old daughter got what Christmas is all about. It's about Christ. 6 of the 9 letters in the word Christmas are the word Christ. And sometimes we get caught up in the fullness of things, right? We overcommit to all of the commitments. We overspend on all the gifts, and we just get caught up in all that's taking place. But this is what matters most. Listen to this in Luke chapter 2. In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. This was the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor over Syria. And everyone went to their own town to register. Luke, who's a doctor, and he's all about the details, he gives us this. He says, at this time. He's saying it's not once upon a time, it's at this moment in history. At this moment, at this time, this is what happened. And to give you background, what happened is this. This guy named Caesar Augustus, he was also known as Octavian. He was adopted by Julius Caesar, the most powerful man in the entire world. And Caesar said, you're going to be the next king. You're the next heir, my adopted son. Now, within a year, Julius Caesar is assassinated. And there is this struggle for power between Octavian and between Mark Antony. And they decide that they're going to split the kingdom, and they're going to go to war. Mark Antony was smart. He was strategic. He reaches out to Cleopatra of Egypt. And Cleopatra ends up bringing in 500 warships, 100,000 soldiers, and 12,000 cavalry to defeat Octavius. That's the goal, and he is smarter, though. And they go into a civil war, and he wins. And as part of the victory and the triumph, he renames himself as Caesar Augustus, meaning sacred or exalted. Now, here's the problem. The world was anything but sacred. The world was anything but exalted. This civil war lasted 20 years. To put that into perspective, our civil war that took place in our nation, which absolutely decimated our country, lasted 4 years. So this civil war was 5 times as long as the civil war that we experienced. And this nation was completely destroyed. Farms were neglected. Towns had been ransacked and besieged. There was no protection. It was the Wild West before there was a Wild West, right? And so what does Julius Caesar do? What does Caesar Augustus do? He decides to take a census. Like any politician, he goes political, right? And he takes the census for 3 reasons. The first is he wants to determine where people were. He wanted to know who is where. The second thing is he wanted to discover who was liable for military service. He wanted to know who could fight for his new army. And then the third thing, which hasn't changed over 2,000 years, he wanted to increase taxes. Merry Christmas, right? This is it. The song gets it wrong. It was not a silent night. The noise from the world that was hurting, from being wrecked by war and destruction and recession and corruption, that sound was deafening. It was not silent. And that's the world that God chose to send his son into. That's the world. Not in the best of times, in the worst of times. So while Octavian was changing his name to exalt himself, Jesus Christ was humbling himself in order to lift up all people. While the military was forcing people to serve, Jesus says, I'm coming as the greatest servant of all. While Rome was increasing taxes, Jesus was coming to pay the bill that you and I could never pay. And when Jesus entered the world, he did it not to demand allegiance. He did it to display his affection. This is what it tells us in verse 4. So Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house and the line of David. He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born, and she gave birth to her firstborn son. She wrapped him in clothes and placed him in a manger because there was no guest room available for them. We romanticize that first Christmas. We kind of like to think that, I don't know, a couple maybe up the freeway in Waco that like remodels stuff, like built that first barn, right? Chip and Joanne Gaines, in case you're just not tracking. That's who we think. We think it was this like beautiful kind of mid-century modern A-frame physique, right? It just had some cool craftsman touches. Guys, it was a cave. And if it wasn't a cave, they believed that it was basically a stall off of the town square. So imagine Georgetown, the best town square in Texas, right? Come on. And imagine just instead of a parking space, you have a couple walls with maybe a roof, maybe not, for some animals and some hay. That's the world that Jesus came into. He either came into a cave or he came into a stall off of a town square. And we think about a manger and we think, oh man, that's like probably a manger. That would be really comfortable, right? Like a step below a sleep number bed. Maybe like a Tempur-Pedic, maybe one of those purple mattresses. Like I've often thought growing up in church, when I see the manger and I see all the hay, I'm like, hey, if I had to, I could sleep in that, right? Like I could make that work. Guys, it was a food trough. And we romanticize the animals. We think the animals looked like this. It didn't. It looked probably more like this, right? We romanticize the birth of Jesus so much. And the reality is there was no room for Joseph and Mary and baby Jesus to go. We get this because in our city, there are seasons when it just gets extra crowded, right? We have these small festivals called South by Southwest, ACL. The world comes to Austin. The world comes to our city during those times. That's what's taking place in Bethlehem at that time. That's what's happening. That's what's going on. So there's no room. And I have to be honest with you, I used to be really judgmental of Joseph. I kind of always envisioned Joseph as that guy when you're on that Southwest airline flight and they get to like C-48 and there's that guy that walks in and he's not even looking for a seat, right? He's just kind of doing the walk of shame all the way back to the back row. He knows he's sitting in the middle seat like by the bathroom. You're not laughing because that's probably happened to you. You're like, that's me. That has happened. I envision Joseph as that guy. Like he's just doing the walk of shame, right? Joseph was so underprepared. And I know what you're thinking. You're like, they didn't have ultrasounds back then. And you're right, they didn't. But for as long as the world has taken place, babies are getting born in 9 months. Like nothing has changed, right? Joseph could have done the math, right? He seems not prepared. But you have to remember, this is a different day and age. You can't just pick up your phone and text a family member and say, hey, we're coming into town. Could we crash in that spare bedroom? And then, when they don't respond, you see the dots, but they never respond. And then you're like, wait a little while. You're like, hey, we'll take a couch. And then you see the dots, they don't respond again. And you're like, we'll take a pullout. I mean, we'll sacrifice a futon, right? Like that was not that day and age. There's no kayak. There's no hotels.com. There's no booking.com with the cool British actor who just shows up in these commercials. And you're like, I just want to go travel there, wherever that is. I want to go there. There was none of that. And so there's no room for Joseph and Mary and Jesus. At least no one made room for them. And here's what you have to see. Jesus was rejected before he ever came into earth. Jesus was rejected before he ever came into earth. He knew that he'd be rejected, and yet he still chose to come into this world. Christ came into this world. And this is good news for you. You might say, Ezra, I'm in a season right now, and it might not be a 20-year civil war, but you're fighting your own battles. You're going through things, and you can resonate with the story of Jesus and the first Christmas because of what he did for us. It says, and there were shepherds living out in the fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks at night. An angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. But the angel said to them, do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all people. Today, in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He is the Messiah, the Lord. This will be a sign to you. You will find a baby wrapped in clothes and lying in a manger. Suddenly, a great company of heavenly hosts appeared with the angel, praising God and saying, glory to God in the highest heaven, and on earth, peace to those on whom his favor rests. When the angels had left them and gone into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, let's go to Bethlehem and see this thing that has happened, which the Lord has told us about. The fact that God chose shepherds to reveal himself is absolutely remarkable. Nobody wanted to be a shepherd. No father is gathered around the Christmas tree with his buddies on Christmas Eve and saying, you know what? We're so proud of our little Liam. He did so well this year as a shepherd. Guess what? He didn't lose a single sheep. He batted 1,000. Liam didn't lose a lamb. Can you believe that? And guess what? Next year he's going to get a promotion. 80 sheep. Yeah, 80. That never happened, right? That never took place. And here's why. Because being a shepherd was kind of, it was not, it was being an outcast. It was the most common job a person could have. As the kids say, it was basic, right? Like there is no prestige, there's no glory in being a shepherd. And this is what I love about Jesus. Jesus said, I'm going to reveal myself to these people first. I'm going to reveal who I am. The fact that the announcement of the angels, think about this. I mean, they're the most mysterious beings in all of creation. And every time people see them, the response is, don't be afraid. So we know that it was crazy. And they're going to the most average Joe people in the world. I love that about the Lord. I love that about the Lord. And here's why this is so good for you and me. Because for any of us that feel unworthy, Jesus came for you. If anyone could have felt unworthy, it was these shepherds. And Jesus said, that's who I'm choosing to reveal myself to. I'm coming to these people. I'm coming for this. We always think about people that are famous. We have magazines at the checkout stands at the grocery store about these people. We see them all over social media. God says it's not the famous, it's those that you would call faceless that I'm coming to. Those that were seen as unclean, God said, you get a front row seat to the greatest moment in history. Those that believe to be unworthy, God says, you are worthy. I'm declaring how worthy you are today. And here's what's so great, that this was not just a family affair. It's for all people, for all time. For you and for me, we get to experience the birth of Jesus. This phrase, good news, it's the word where we get our word gospel from. The gospel. And the gospel is for all people. Great news for all people everywhere. Not one day, not when I'm like 2.0 version of myself or 3.0 or whatever the new thing is. Today. God says, today I am fulfilling. Today I am moving. And listen to their response, verse 16. So they hurried off and found Mary and Joseph and the baby, who was lying in the manger. When they had seen him, they spread the word concerning what had been told about this child. And all who heard it were amazed at what the shepherd said to them. But Mary treasured up all these things and pondered them in her heart. The shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all the things they had heard and seen, which were just as they had been told. For thousands of years prior to this moment, people were speculating on what God looked like. They were wondering about the image of God. Societies imagined, tribes considered and contemplated, and people always had these wild conclusions. They thought God had been a golden calf. They thought maybe he was an angry volcano, that he has wings, he breathes fire, he eats infants, that he demands penance. We think about God and we think about things that we sometimes wonder even today, that maybe God's kind of fickle. We think God's maybe unaware, or maybe he's uncertain, or maybe he's just uncaring. Maybe God doesn't care. We think that God is someone to be either appeased or simply avoided. And yet it's none of those things. None of those things. In our wildest imagination, I don't think anyone would have thought that God would come as an infant. Heaven opened itself up and placed its most precious one in the womb of a teenager. The unbreakable in an instant made himself breakable. Eternal became pierceable. The one who was larger than the universe suddenly became the size of an embryo. The one that sustains the world says, I'm going to show up in a manger. The one who created the world says, I'm now going to become creation. God came near, not as a flash of light, not as some kind of angelic presence, but God himself in flesh. The question I always wonder is, why would God go so far? Why would God do all that? Just send the angel and allow him to give the message to everybody. But God doesn't do that. He doesn't do that because God operates in a different way. The truth is, despite what you've maybe heard before, God cares about you. And that's why he came. He came because he cares about you. He came because he's for you. He came because he loves you that much. I'm a big music fan. I love music. Music is always playing in my car, in my AirPods, in my home. You might have a Christmas playlist. I think I got like 4 right now. Like I'm just always kind of working on the next one. I think music makes everything better. And there's just these seasons sometimes when you hear a song and you're like, that song is just symbolic of this season. That song is kind of like, almost like the soundtrack or maybe the anthem of a particular season. In 2017, we had some really unique opportunities to go on some missions trips, and I'm so grateful. I mean, they were amazing what I got to do. I got to go to the Philippines for 2 weeks. I got to go to Africa for 2 weeks. But in those seasons, I just found myself missing my wife and my children so much. And there was this song that came out in 2017. I don't even know how I heard it. It was probably just on a playlist. It got recommended to me. And it was this song called Oceans Away. And this song it was a modern song, but it almost sounded like an old school U2 song with like that driving bass line and those great harmonies. And this song kind of just became my song for those seasons and those trips. And basically the premise of the song is that we're an ocean away, which my wife and I were multiple oceans away on both those trips. But it was the idea that even though we're so far apart, that we still have each other. And that we'll see each other again. And I don't know, you might not even like this song, so it's like, don't even go to Spotify. But I just love this song. It became one of my favorite songs in that season and in that time. And I often thought, man, I want to go see that band. I want to see that band play that song. I want to see that band play all the other songs. And we were just never in the same city as this band. We were never even in the same state as this band. If they came to Texas, we were somewhere else. And then this thing called the pandemic hit, and bands stopped touring for 3 years. And I told Kendra, I said, I would just love to see this band once. Like, it probably will never happen, but I just love to see it. And one day I get an email from Live Nation, and they said, hey, this band is coming to Austin. And I don't even text my wife. I don't even call her. I just go, I click, and I buy the tickets. They weren't even headlining the show. They were like the second act, right? I'm like, I don't care. I don't even really like this other band that's headlining, but I just want to see this band this badly. I really want to hear this song that much. And so the day approaches, and every time I started to think about this concert, I just got excited. I'm like, I can't wait to see this band. And like you who maybe have romanticized Christmas, I kind of maybe romanticized that concert, and I imagine what it was like to hear that song Oceans Away with my wife in my arms and just this great moment. And the day comes, and we're excited. Both her and I were like, we can't wait. And she looks stunning. She looks absolutely beautiful. And we go to the concert, and we're having a great time, and the band comes out, and they play a couple songs, and then they make a comment about how much they love Austin, which every band always says, oh, I love this city, right? I think this is what they do in every city. Can anyone fact check that? Anyone else from another city, and do they say that when they go to your city? Definitely happens. Thank you. They're all bands are liars. No, I'm just kidding. So we're sitting there, and they say, you know, we've taken 3 years off. This is one of our first shows in 3 years, and we're a little bit rusty, but man, it's so good to be here with you. And they go through their whole set, and then they end. And at the very end, they say, we just want to thank you. Thank you so much for coming out and spending your hard-earned on us. And it kind of like, you're like, are they going to end, or are they going to do one more song? Like, because like the second act doesn't get an encore, right? Like that's just... And they go, we got one more song. I'm like, yes, they're going to play Oceans Away. I grab my wife. I got my arms around her. I'm like, this is it, babe. This is that moment I've been thinking about. And it goes silent, and you're like, okay, I'm just waiting for that first note. And then they play one of the songs off the new album. And the song ends. They say, thank you, Austin. And they walk off the stage. And my hope of hearing that song walked off the stage with that band. I'm like, what? Like, why that? And people around us, everyone's like, why didn't they play Oceans Away? It's got like several 100 million more plays on Spotify than any of their other songs. Like, it's not a one-hit wonder, but like, that's the song. And we're walking the parking lot, and I'm just kind of a little bummed. I'm just like, I had a great time, but I'm like, I really wanted to hear that song. And as we're walking, there's a lady next to us walking, and she's talking with her friend, and she goes, I came here to see that band. She goes, I've been waiting 7 years to see that band. And she goes, I don't know why they didn't play Oceans Away. She goes, it was great seeing him. She goes, but I'm kind of feeling disappointed. I'm like, man, this lady's in my head. Like, she's reading my thoughts, right? A summer goes by, and again, I get another email that the band's coming back to Austin. But this time, I'm like, I don't know. Like, they were good. I'd love to see them again, but they did us wrong, you know? And finally, we talk about it. I'm like, let's go. They're going to be headlining. They're going to play a little bit longer. But I, like, tempered all expectations, right? Like, there's no way. So we show up. Again, my wife looks beautiful. It's a smaller venue in East Austin, probably like 500 people maybe. And the opening band comes on, they play, then they come out, and just, it's electric. I mean, the lights, the sound, they had it dialed in. And after like the fourth song, they just kind of stop, and the guy's like, hold on. He goes, hold on. He goes, we're from Jersey. We're from Jersey. They said, we feel like this is like a home show. Like, you guys are just like getting after it. And Robbie, they probably say that stuff in every show too. But like, you know, they keep talking about how this just feels like such an amazing show. And it was electric. I mean, top 5 shows for sure. I mean, it was amazing. And they play through the rest of the set. And I'm like, dude, you're not going to play this song again. And again, like, I'm just like, you know, having a great time. But I'm like, don't get your hopes up. Don't get your hopes up on this band. And then the song ends, and it comes down, and just like, kind of like the music's just like that. It's just real quiet. The lead singer says, hey, I got to share something with you. He said, we were here in the springtime, and he goes, we were really focused on getting that new album out and promoting that new album. And he goes, we didn't bring our best. And then he did something that kind of shocked all of us. He started to cry. And tears are coming down his face, and he goes, I'm sorry. He goes, we owe you our best. He goes, we're just a couple of kids that put some songs together out on SoundCloud, and we never thought this would lead us anywhere, and now we're playing this sold-out show in front of you today. And he goes, I'm sorry. I'm sorry we didn't bring our best last time. We won't do it again. He said, we do this because of you. We get to do what we get to do because of you. If it wasn't for you, we would not be doing this. So thanks for letting our dreams come true. Thanks for supporting us. And then the lights just go out. And then the guitar line from that song, Oceans Away, comes on. The place goes just nuts. Like, people are screaming and yelling, and it's like a sing-along concert. This time I do grab my wife. I get my arms around her. I'm like, all right, babe. And it was a great, great moment. 2 thoughts came into my head as I sat there and I sang along. The first thought was, man, I respect these guys. They made a mistake and they owned it, and I respect them for it. They're back up in my books, right? Then here's the second thing. It's the whole reason I tell you this song. As I sat there and I thought about what he just said, I thought, that's the meaning of Christmas. What he said, God would say to us, I'm here because of you. Emmanuel, God with us. I'm here because of you, so that you could have a relationship with me today, that you could have hope in me today, that you could have joy today, that you could have life today and for all of eternity. Then I thought, but that's not completely true. What he said is not what God said. When he said, we didn't bring our best, God says, I gave you my best. I gave you my best. I gave you my son, Jesus. And there's nothing better, there's nothing greater than that. Today on this Christmas, you and I get to stand in the presence of God, and we get to experience his goodness, his fullness, everything that he is. And we might not have been there that Christmas, but guess what? We get to receive the same gift, the gift of Jesus, God's best on this Christmas. My 3-year-old daughter, she got it right. Christmas is about Christ. And if you haven't given your life to Jesus, it's about you coming into a relationship with him. The joy and the promise of that very first Christmas miracle we get to experience today. You see, God took on a human face in hope that he would be able to see your face. He became one of us so that we could become one with him. Would you bow your heads with me today? Today, Jesus is coming to you not with a list of things for you to do, but it's with a list of things that he's already done. He said, today I'm making this relationship possible. Today, I'm making this possible for you. You see, Jesus doesn't add burdens. He lifts them off of us. Jesus came into the world so that we could have a relationship with him. You see, Rome needed a census to know where people were. God says, I already know where you are. Today, he's inviting you into a relationship with him. He's inviting you to find him, to know him, to be known by him. Today, he'd say to you on this Christmas Eve, 2023, I want to give you the greatest gift possible. And in a moment, we're going to sing one of our favorite songs as we light these candles. But before we do, we want to give you that opportunity to begin a relationship with Jesus, to have a relationship with him. Today, if that's you and you're saying, I want a relationship with Jesus, I want to know him as my Lord and Savior, I want to start this, I want to go there, I want that. Would you just raise your hand today? I want to agree with you. Yeah, agree with you. Yeah, agree with you as well, buddy. Yeah. Jesus, we thank you for what